And now we'd like to welcome to our stage the third guest speaker for our day, Mr. Alexander Larson, President of Baldwin Global Risk Services and founder of Risk Guide, as well as Governor at Berwick Academy, to present Bridging the Gap Between Project Risk Management and ERM.
Thank you very much. Morning, afternoon, morning still. Morning, everyone. Thank you, Peter, for your presentation. I highly recommend that you do attend, if you get the chance, the masterclass. I've worked with Peter before. He's excellent when it comes to schedule and cost risk analysis. And especially if you get him one-to-one and you ask him questions, he's got a lot of experience in the field. So if you get a chance to speak to him, I suggest you do. I'm waiting for my presentation to come up. It's not here. Let me see. There it is. Okay. So, I'm going to be talking about projects, project risk management, and how you can link that to enterprise risk management. I apologize to the video camera people. I like to walk a little bit, so you might have to track me and stuff. Major projects that went catastrophically wrong, and I'm sure everyone is well experienced with regards to projects that get delayed or run over in terms of budgets. But just some examples: the International Space Station went over budget by about 68 billion. The Olympics, 39 billion, and so forth. You can see there what was planned and what the final amount was. There's also a study that was done in Norway of Norwegian oil and gas projects, all of them significantly delayed. It tends to happen. I'd like to ask the question of everyone in here: how many people here are used to seeing their projects either overrun in terms of budget or schedule? Yeah, quite a lot of people. Yeah, I think it's quite normal in our projects. There we go. Then my next question is then, how many of you actually know your projects? In other words, do you actually identify all your projects within an organization and prioritize them in order of importance? How many people could say, yes, we do that? Okay, how many people don't do that? Okay, so more hands go up for don't than do. I think that tends to happen. We know we have projects, but we don't necessarily look at actually grading them or ranking them. And just a little example, simple way of grading your projects is to look at, well, how much does it cost? What's the investment? What's the resource? How important is this for our strategy in terms of gaining competitive advantage? Maybe it's going to help our reputation. Maybe it's going to help us meet or exceed our objectives. That might be one way you could give it a score. What are the potential returns, and how long is it going to take to receive those returns? And how urgent is this? It could be for various reasons. This is just a simple table. There's obviously much more advanced ways of doing it, but it's a good start if you don't already rank your projects. And why is it important to rank your projects? Well, because if you rank your projects, you can start looking at, well, which are our red projects, which are our amber projects, and green. In other words, which are our critical projects we need to manage much more closely than others. And it might not come down to price or cost. It might come down to how important it is, or it might come down to any of the other factors. This is an example again, red, amber, green, where expenditure of up to X amount, Z amount. Moderate amber would be expenditure between two amounts, and then anything above is a red, and so forth. It's just a guide. But if you can get it into red, amber, green, you're in a much better position to start managing your project and your risks. There is, outside, the Institute of Risk Management has published Fueling the Debate, Latest Trends in Energy 2019. In that, it was a survey done that organizations globally took part in. They identified that what will the main areas of focus with regards to risk management be in the next few years? Enterprise risk management was up there, and project risk management was up there. Two of the higher ones. How mature is the company in the following areas? Well, enterprise risk management was at one of the lowest. Project risk management they felt they were quite comfortable in. And then finally, what will the main area of focus for your organization be? And you'll notice that new projects is also very high up on the agenda. So new projects coming online, we want to focus on project risk management. We're not 100% there yet with enterprise risk management. So let's see how we can improve things. And by the way, we spoke earlier about community of practice, which is why the Institute of Risk Management has now set up an energy special interest group, which you can join by contacting marketing@theirm.org or going to the main website there. Basically, the idea is we're trying to get as many people within risk management and the energy industry, whether it's renewables or oil and gas or anything like that, and we want to try to build a community of practice, share best practice across industries, across regions, but within energy. Try to make it a virtual group, but also a chance to actually meet with people face to face as well. And we're going to continue to produce these kind of publications. And please, if you join, feel free to offer your own expertise, because we're always looking for contributions and articles. So project risk management, I'm not going to talk too much about it. Peter already covered what schedule risk analysis is. We get some outputs. But the question is, what do we do with those outputs? And that's really what I want to talk about today. And how do those outputs link to enterprise risk management? I'm going to focus on 5 key points. There's many, but I'm going to focus on 5 just now. One is insurance, which again, Peter covered already. We're going to look at risk treatment and cost benefit, how we can actually secure funding to manage our project risks. Enterprise risk management escalation. So how do we escalate risks across the organization when we aren't capturing risks from the projects in any meaningful way? Which would lead to more effective risk reporting, which I'm not going to cover in great detail, because I think we have a presentation on reporting a bit later. I think Martin's going to cover that, but I will cover it. And portfolio reserve pools. How do we make sure that our projects, all our projects, especially our most critical ones, are more successful? So let's look at insurance first. Okay, so we know that we can already secure insurance premiums at lower cost because we're able to give a more accurate view of when the project is going to finish. Risk registers, or there's a question, in your risk registers, how many have a column that says this risk is insurable and another column that says this risk is insured? Does anyone have that? Okay. Not too many hands. If you had that, it allows everyone in the organization that is identifying risk to also say, we believe this is an insurable risk. In other words, this risk could potentially be insured, and by the way, we don't know if it's insured or not. That can then automatically go to those responsible for securing insurance, and guess what? They now can see the gaps in their insurance program, just like that. Additionally, you can optimize your insurance program. If you know that, oh, we don't have as big captives, but I'm not going to get into that. Then, that was insurance. Now, what about managing our risks? Peter mentioned that this is the kind of output you get, and he also mentioned that you can actually remove risks, rerun the analysis and see how things change. In other words, you can actually see date changes based on taking risks out or reducing risks. So if you have a management action in mind to reduce a risk, you can find out how much it costs, you can put it all together, you can reduce the risk, rerun it and say, we're going to save months. Now imagine if you took that to management and said, with the what-if scenarios, instead of coming with the traditional 5x5 risk matrix, which is a fine tool, just that we also would like to use other types of tools. So what if we were able to ignore that and start saying, look, we have two options to manage our risk at a project level. And we've been trying to secure this, but we haven't been able to. But guess what? It might cost $400,000 to implement, but we're going to save 60 days and save $500,000 additional cost. And then this is option 2. It gives management actual, real information to make decisions. This is risk and decision making. This is also projects buying into risk management, because now they're probably going to get funding secured if it's not already built into contingency or reserves, which we'll cover soon. So now instead of the risk matrix, we've got the tornado diagram or whatever other diagram we might use to build our case. So that's our second way of using project risk analysis for decision making and so forth. Who's seen this film? Deepwater Horizon. Mark Wahlberg, yes, I see some, yeah, okay. I didn't even have to ask you to raise your hand. Some people already started. It's a good film. When they sit down in a room, Mark Wahlberg says, you know, we can't do this, it's too risky. And he says, Malkovich says, not happening. We have targets to meet. In other words, we have bonuses to make. And this goes back to the conversation we had earlier today about building a risk culture and how do you engage people and rewarding people not just for their bonuses because they're meeting schedule, but also for protecting the organization by managing risk. There wasn't a proper approach in place to allow this risk to be captured and sent above to maybe a risk management department or maybe to a risk committee who could then make the decision. Maybe they would have made the same decision, or maybe they would have felt otherwise. So basically, if we're capturing risks across the organization, we're escalating up, we're also communicating down, trying to manage, well, we should also be looking at our partnerships, but also projects. If we're escalating risks all the way from the bottom as well as downwards, what about the projects? We need to be identifying project risks and building that into our escalation process so that not only are we getting risks from the organization, but the project risks are being escalated as well. Now, it might not be just all the project risks. Remember at the start, I said we can grade our projects, rank our projects. Red projects are maybe the most critical, and therefore those risks get escalated more easily. For example, every organization is different. Go back to Martin's point, one size does not fit all. If we had the right ERM escalation process that included projects, we would then improve our reporting. Again, talking about the grading up there, this might be an example of project grading. You might have risks in there, the bigger the bubble, the bigger the risk, or it might be the project. You can do it however you want. The point is you're getting much better information to make decisions when it comes to risk reporting. Now, when it comes to risk reporting, I just want to point something out. A little word of warning. And I think, again, Martin's going to cover this. However, when you're driving home from work, are you looking at the mirror or are you looking ahead of you? Ahead. Yeah, it would be quite ridiculous to look in the rear view mirror. You use it every now and then to get a snapshot of where you are, but you're looking into the future. And what is risk management if it isn't looking into the future? Risk management is supposed to help decision making. Risk management is supposed to make us or help us exceed, I like to use the word exceed, not meet, exceed our objectives. You cannot do that if you're looking backwards all day long. Risk reports suffer from last quarter, we identified X amount of risks. Last quarter, we managed this many risks. Last quarter, okay, fine, what's happening looking forward? And that's where we talk about emerging risks. It's important to be doing this kind of reporting, of course, but we also need to be looking out the front mirror, not the front mirror, the front window. So that's just a word of warning with regards to reporting, and I hope this will be echoed later when we see Martin's masterclass. So that brings us into the portfolio of projects, how identifying risk, running quantitative risk analysis, both schedule and cost, and we come up with a contingency at the end of the day. Can I just again ask, when you set contingency for your projects, do you do any sort of analysis, or is it sort of a, okay, 10%? How many just assign 10%? How many actually do analysis work to assign the contingency? Excellent. Okay, so a lot of people are actually doing the right thing by doing analysis. So if each project has a contingency, there should probably also be a reserve, and it will look something like, oh dear, what's going on here? There. It should look something like this. You have the estimate, you have the contingency, which might be between P10 and P50, and that is the project level contingency, by the way. That is what the project should be able to spend in order to manage the risks that occur. What tends to happen, of course, is, oh, there's been a change to the project. It's okay, this is part of our budget, and they spend it like that. But that's another issue altogether. The P50 to B90 might be your management reserve, and this should ideally be sitting at the top, above the project itself. You might have it linked into enterprise risk management, or you might have a project committee that oversees all the projects. And if we have that, we can actually start using this management reserve in a portfolio, something like this. If you have all these projects, and they all have their own contingency, managing their own risk, but some need more help than others. Imagine if you had a portfolio reserve pool. So each project has their own management reserve, but they're pooled together so that the project committee or whoever is responsible can actually assign a budget to improve some of the projects that are struggling, especially if those projects are the red projects, the ones that we need completed on time. Now that is adding value to your projects. I'm going to give you an example of how we did this in Iraq. One of the world's largest oil fields, 14 billion barrels of recoverable oil. We were building, it was a project, but we were also operational. So it was the two sides of it. 30 to 40 billion dollars of investment for full development and $6 billion worth of contracts just in 2013, 2014 alone. So very big project. This is what we were building. I don't want to spend too much time on it. What do you suppose some of the top risks of building this site in Iraq were? Sorry? Security. Sorry? Terrorism, okay, yeah, security, terrorism. HSE? Sorry? Legislation, yeah, that's a good one. Political? Sorry? Yeah, excellent. Okay, I can't hear too well, but we've captured some stuff. And you're all absolutely correct, absolutely. I wouldn't argue with any of those risks. However, most of those risks we are well aware of, and we are managing very well and paying a lot of money to manage. Security, well, we've got a huge amount of security contractors helping us, and all of these kind of things. So, we are usually comfortable thinking inside the box. We need to start thinking outside of the box. So one of the things we started doing when we were in Iraq was, first of all, don't capture issues. If it's an issue, it should not be on the risk register. And this is echoing what Martin said earlier. Also, let's start looking at emerging risks. And by the way, the IRM outside has a nice horizon scanner document that is, gives you an idea of how to start identifying emerging risks. Nice document publication by the IRM. And also think outside the box, those three things. Because this little guy here, little mousy, he was causing all sorts of trouble because he was chewing through the wires. Power outage, we had a power plant. When you put in the wires and the cables, if you don't use gloves, oil residue gets on the wire. And little Mousy loves it. And he chews through it, and then you get a blackout. Outside the box a little bit. Another example. What do you suppose a volcano in Iceland has to do with Iraq? Does anyone remember the eruption in Iceland that caused the smoke? Yeah. Yeah? It's suspended. And how does that affect me in Iraq? Exactly. We had more than 1,000 staff, rotation, a month on, a month off. What happens when a volcano occurs and all flights are grounded? Now, I am not suggesting that we should have identified volcano, but we already knew from 9/11, from other incidents, that it's possible that all planes are grounded. So we know that staff might not get into work. Maybe it's a bad winter. We don't know. We need to plan for these events. And it might be a volcano. We never captured volcano, but we were prepared for an incident that would cause our flights to be cancelled. We also developed project requirements. So remember, going right back to the start, I talked about let's grade our projects, red, amber, green. Well, we started making requirements. If it's a red project, we must do cost risk analysis. We must do schedule risk analysis on an ongoing basis and have dedicated risk resource in place. Risk mitigation strategies in place and cost benefit analysis performed, project committee member to form part of the project team, and so forth. The amber projects had a bit less to do, and the green projects just give us a risk register and keep it updated. We weren't too worried about the smaller projects. But it allowed us to create requirements for our projects that they needed to follow in terms of risk management. The other thing we did was we brought all of these aspects into enterprise risk management, under the enterprise risk management umbrella, so that we could see everything that was happening. When you look at the banks, 2008, well, they're very good at risk management in their individual silos. But this silo doesn't know what's going on at the other side of the organization because the information isn't free-flowing in their silos. We want to avoid that. So some of the strategic risks that we identified, these were them. Major delay of projects impact, and by the way, I can't be very specific, so I've generalized some of these risks for sensitivity purposes. But basically, major delay of projects impacting other critical projects. So one project gets delayed, it's going to impact another critical project. Well, we need power, and we're building a power plant. If that gets delayed, we're building other projects that now are also going to get delayed. Maybe we need to restructure how our projects are starting. Maybe we need to start this project a little bit later because we know there's a potential for delays of the power plant. Government default, oil price dropping below budgeted levels. A lot of the time I see on risk registers, oh, oil price is a risk. Why? It goes up, it goes down, what's the risk? So we were very specific and talked about oil price drops below our budgeted level. Because obviously we're prepared for a best case and worst case, but what happens if it gets even worse? Failure to manage multiple contractors, impact on reputation from delays, negative impact on IRR, and so forth. Major security incident. Project and operation specific risks that also impacted the strategic level were reservoir pressure. So we have to worry about how much oil we are actually taking out because the reservoir pressure may be impacted, and that's going to impact other aspects of what we're trying to do. Major claims from contractors on projects. So if we are delayed because of our own mistakes, we are going to get claims from major contractors. Major environmental or safety security incident, delays and cost overruns, well pad completion dates, export pipeline completion dates, delay of demining. We can't even start anything without demining. So these were some of the project risks and operations risks that came up. But how did we use this? The project information was used for decision making in our overall strategy. We created scenarios that were based on not just oil prices, but the reservoir pressures, the projects that we had running, how delayed they might be or what the cost overruns might be. And we built all of this into a model in order to come up with several strategies that top management at HQ back in Moscow could make proper decisions with in terms of should we just terminate this altogether, or should we just do, instead of completion, just do phase 2 and 3. Stakeholder management. With those dates that Peter has managed to get with his schedule risk analysis, with those dates that we have, we can start managing the media, contractors, shareholders, HQ, our president. We can start giving them more accurate information so that they know what to expect. We can start pushing contractors a bit more if we feel, oh, this doesn't look like we would like it to look. Decisions on other mega project bids, again, that all links into previous ones. And cash flow management. We are now able to see how our cash flow is going to be over the coming months, the coming year. Because if we don't finish our export pipeline, it means we can't export oil, which means we're not getting that oil money. We might have several well pads, but what's the point of spending all that money on well pads without the export pipeline? Overall contingencies, reserves and exposures, as well as legal exposures. It gives us a much better insight into our overall risk within our organization. Planning safe operations and shutdowns. This was a project and operations. We had well pads, and we also had to expand our well pads. So what happens? You need to shut down. But we can't have a planned shutdown when we don't know exactly when it's going to be. It's no use waiting a week before and then you have to plan everything. No, if we do a schedule risk analysis, we have a much clearer window of opportunity. Even to get vendors in for visa purposes. Insurance, business continuity. We were able to build various risks from the projects of leakages, spillages, any other major incident. We could run quantitative risk analysis and build it into our business continuity plans as well. It wasn't just operations, it was projects, building it all together. How is it going to affect our reputation at a top level? And security management. We work in remote locations. Surely it's good to know when we're going to be working in those remote locations. So those are how we use project information for better decision making that affected enterprise risk management and the strategic level. Another good IRM document is a risk culture resources for practitioners. That's free as well. You can get that on their website. But risk framework and culture is also so important, as we've already discussed, so I'm not going to cover that in too much detail. However, I'm not selling anything. This is just a website I have for information on risk management. I have videos up on specifically risk culture conversations. You can visit it on my YouTube channel or the WordPress channel. It has lots of different articles on risk management, including from my time in Iraq on projects, on infrastructure and all of that kind of stuff. Not selling anything. This isn't my company. This is simply a risk guide that I get from lots of different people. Risk culture I'm not going to cover because we talked about this earlier already. And then just conclusion and benefits. I will leave this up here. I don't need to go into this in great detail either. I appreciate that we are trying to catch up a bit on time. So I'm going to leave it at that. These will of course be shared, so you will have this as well for your information after the event. So that's that. Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate we ran through it quickly.